Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to for StarCraft 2 strategy. Going to be taking a look at a Terran strategy. Now, in this particular replay, our Terran player here is Show, and our Protoss opponent is Mouse Mana. Let's go into Show Vision here. So what we're going to be looking at today is a variation of the 1-1-1 build. And it's going to be primarily focused on, as far as unit composition, it's going to be primarily focused on getting Marines, siege tanks, and a Raven. Now, as is the case with the 1-1-1, we will be utilizing the fact that we can get multiple types of units. We're also going to be seeing a Banshee, I believe a Hellion or two as well. But primarily, we're going to be looking at a strong push with Marine, tank, and Raven. Now, the Raven is, of course, a very, very strong unit against Protoss if your Protoss opponent goes stalker heavy, or at least relatively stalker heavy, because of course that point defense drone absorbs those stalker shots. Now, with that said, a lot, especially if your opponent's going for any sort of a 3 or a 4 gate build, you're likely to be seeing a heavy amount of stalkers, so getting that Raven is going to be a really good idea. Also, it's going to allow you to take out any observers your opponent has hanging around your base, and then of course it's going to allow you to detect any Dark Templar if those happen to come out. But let's just start off by jumping into the build real quick. We started off very, very standard with that 10 depot, 12 barracks, and then we're going to be seeing the, again, very typical Terran opening. It's going to be 13 Refinery right there, 13 Refinery, and then a 16 Orbital Command. Very, very standard opening. If you play as Terran and you really haven't gotten that opening down yet, I suggest you do it. This really sets you up in the best position for, as far as your economy is concerned. Getting that Orbital Command as fast as possible is pretty vital. You want to get that at 16 supply as soon as the barracks is done, pretty much every time. There's really no reason to delay that Orbital Command any longer than you have to. The faster you can get those mules on the board, the better you are. So as you can see here, trying to fend off one of these probes hanging around our base, trying to see precisely what we're doing. Ideally, what you want to do is you want to kill this probe before you drop down your second tech building. Obviously, if it's going to delay you too long, then don't wait that long. Luckily, though, with the build that we're going for, we do have to wait till we get that 100 Vespene gas, and then at that point we can drop that factory. So as long as we can kill this probe before you get to that 100 gas, you're actually in a good position, because he doesn't know if you're going for a second barracks or if you're going for a factory, and his response will be vastly different depending on what you do there. So trying to get him, unfortunately we don't. We didn't want to delay that any longer than we had to. So the probe was able to see the fact that we're getting this factory, so he knows not to expect a bio-heavy build early in the game. You can see he clearly saw that there, but ideally, yes, you do want to try to kill that probe and prevent him from seeing this second building of yours, because again, his response will be vastly different depending on if you get 2 barracks or if you get a barracks and a factory. So yeah, we're going for this 1-1-1-1 build. The factory was laid down there at 18 supply, and then at 20 supply is when we started getting our second refinery. So what I said at the beginning of the game, we're going to be looking primarily at a build involving Marine heavy, some siege tanks, and a Raven. So starting off with the Hellion, though, because we don't want to quite get that tech lab out for that those siege tanks yet, because we are going to need that Vespene gas for our Starport units. One thing I do want to note in this game too, the scout is incredibly late. Show going out very, very late with the scout. I strongly suggest scouting much earlier than this. If he were to see some sort of a 2-gate push or anything of the sort, he would not be prepared for it. And that could be problematic. So, again, ideally, you do want to scout around after that 10 supply depot goes down. So the Starport here, we saw that at 26 supply. We're also going to be getting a tech lab here on this factory. Basically, after we made that first Hellion is when you went ahead. After that first Hellion came out and we used it to scout, we went ahead and put a tech lab down on this factory. That was at 18 supply. And then we're just going to swap this out here and start producing out of the Starport with the tech lab. Starting off with the Banshee just to do some harassment in his mineral line, just to also get some scouting information. Basically want to see what's going on. Going to be using the Banshee for that purpose. And then after that, we're going to be following up with the Raven. Something else I want to make note of, a lot of people, when you see these types of builds and you see Marine heavy, they say, well, why don't you just get a reactor right away on your barracks? Why are you producing all these Marines without getting a reactor first? The point is that in teching up, in going barracks, factory, Starport, you are very susceptible to an early push. So you basically need to consistently be making Marines or some sort of unit out of this barracks, whether or not you get a fast tech lab and want to do Marauders, but it's much better off to go with Marines, maybe put a bunker at the front of your base. But you need to consistently make these units, because if you don't, if you get pushed out against while you're teching all the way up to a Starport and trying to get a Banshee out, you will be behind an opponent who goes straight for early game forces. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So you need these constant units. And if you take all the time required, we can see a little observer there, if you take all the time required to build a reactor, which is a full 50 seconds, you are pretty much going to be short almost 2 Marines. You can see one Marine that takes 25 seconds to build. So you'll be 2 Marines short, and then you have to wait for a 3rd Marine to build. You have to wait for an additional Marine to build once that reactor is actually on. So all that time, that's a huge window where your opponent could attack you with just a measly force, and they could do significant damage to you. So that's why you don't see people plop reactors down right away, because you do need those initial forces before you can tech up to this, especially if you're going hard tech like this. If we were going for a 3 racks build, then we could do with getting a tech lab pretty early and then getting a reactor, because you do have early forces. But when you're going hard for a Starport, you won't be able to afford it. So we're going to be taking a look here, also seeing a second barracks go down. This second barracks did go down at 35 supply. So as you can see, we start off with a 1-on-1, then we went for second barracks with a reactor. And here's this army mix I was talking about, getting these Marines, the siege tank, and that Raven. Essentially, as soon as we built that first Banshee and we went out to harass with that, we started building that Raven. And then when we swapped that off, when we moved the factory that we initially put this tech lab on over here, we dropped that tech lab and then started putting siege tanks out of here. Now as you can see, we don't have siege mode. In fact, not going for siege mode because we do want to use the Vespian that we have to even just make more siege tanks and then make units out of our Starport. Also going to be wanting to get some upgrades as well, maybe even seeing that combat shield come. Not a bad idea. So opting not to get that siege mode because we'd rather have those more units for this push. We're basically going to be trying to do as much damage as possible in this push that we're about to go out with. Also bringing some SCVs with you, not going to be a bad idea. They can be used for 2 purposes, one being a meat shield, the second one being used to repair your siege tanks. I'm going to be coming out with an expansion during a push. This is something I talk to a lot of people about. That's always a good time to expand. When you're going to be pushing out, it buys you time to get your expansion fully saturated, and it kind of distracts your opponent as well. Even if you don't do massive damage to them when you push out, it does buy you enough time. Also, we're seeing here the general idea that, you know, off of one base you can support so many buildings. When you expand, you put more buildings down. So as you can see, pushing into our opponent's base, I'm going to be using the siege tanks ideally to target fire these stalkers. They shoot pretty fast and they do very well against armored units. You can see that there. That point defense drone also going down, that's going to cut back on any of the stalker fire within this radius until they use up all those shots, or that energy rather. And you can see here just how effective this push can be. Our opponent did expand themselves. We did see that with the scouting Banshee, and that was the reason we went ahead and decided to push out when we did. And this can be such a potent mix against Protoss ground. We would be in a tough spot if there were any Colossi on the board right now, but he pretty much would have had to hard tech straight to Colossus in order to have them out right now. So we were pretty safe in this push as it was, but do keep in mind that if you scout that any Colossus are coming out with such a marine heavy army, it's going to be pretty difficult to do much damage. You're probably going to want to maybe swap out this Starport onto this reactor and start getting some Vikings out to deal with those Colossus, and then even at that point consider getting that siege tech. So yeah, guys, you can see here a pretty potent mix of units, also a very diverse mix of units, and that's really the advantage that this 1-1-1 build offers you. Now let's go ahead and look at that build order. We started off with that 10 supply depot, followed up with a 12 barracks and 13 refinery. Then at 16 supply, we saw that orbital command. Also at 16 supply, seeing that second supply depot. At 18 supply is when that factory came out. 20 supply, we got our second refinery. 26 supply came that Starport. And then at 35 supply, we got that second barracks. We just started producing mass marines, getting some siege tanks out of this factory. Also started out with that Banshee to do some harassment as well as some scouting of our opponent's base. And then right after that, we got our Raven using the point defense drone to nullify any stalkers within the vicinity of it. Also, again, you want to target fire those armored units with these siege tanks, and this can be a very strong push. So once again, guys, this has been for StarCraft 2 Strategy. If you guys like our videos and you like what we're doing here, then please do go ahead and subscribe to our channel. Keep watching and keep owning, guys. And you know, at this point, you really are in a strong position, especially once you get these siege tanks sieged up. You're going to be in a really strong position. Getting 2 reactors here as well on these barracks. Again, we're going for a very marine heavy build. We can just use this 1 tech lab for upgrades, starting off with the stim pack, and then it's going to be followed up with that combat shield as well.